Good evening, and welcome to Join the Discussion, a monthly show about senior health and aging. My name is Madelene Francese. I am the Vice President of Marketing and Strategic Planning for Heber Senior Care, and I will be your host. Tonight, we're going to deviate from our normal topic as we have a rare opportunity to spend some time with the very busy, recently elected representative, Jillian Gilchrest. Jillian is the representative from the 18th District and has been described as an unconventional candidate and is now working at the Capitol to move legislation in what people describe as an unconventional manner. We're going to talk to her about how she goes about attacking her job, but when a time when people don't even think about jumping into politics. Representative Jillian Gilchrest, background social worker, currently a teacher at the University of St. Joseph's College, mother of 2 young children, decided to jump in with both feet. I don't know when she finds the time, but that's what we're going to find out today, along with a number of other important pieces of information. So thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
You are busy.
And happy to be here.
Happy to be here. I don't know how you fit me in. So first, thank you for joining us tonight.
Yes.
Let me just ask a simple question. Background, did you grow up in the West Hartford or Connecticut area? Are you new?
Sure. So I am originally from New York,
Okay.
not the city, not too far up north, Cornwall, which is in the Hudson Valley. And I attended the University of Connecticut, and that's what brought me to Connecticut.
Oh, okay.
And then I got a job out of college and met my now husband, and so we
So
stayed
let me
in
back
Connecticut.
up.
Yeah.
So you went to college in Connecticut, found a job in Connecticut,
Yes.
and stayed in
I'm one of
Connecticut.
those.
You're one of those on top
Those
of
rare
it.
people, yeah.
Thank you for doing
Yeah,
that.
happy to. Love Connecticut. And then we found West Hartford. We had some friends who lived here, but we discovered the downtown, and that's the only place I wanted to live. I grew up very rural, and then Yukon was very rural, and so I
Right.
really loved the sidewalks and the ability to walk and be downtown.
It's a wonderful mix of suburban city, safe, yet close enough for so much to do in Hartford. West Hartford is a wonderful district. So now did you ever imagine that you would serve in this way?
No, if you had told me this in undergrad, I wouldn't have believed it.
Why?
That's not what I went to college for.
Right, you went as social worker, correct?
Well, no. So I actually started as theater studies, and
Oh
then
my gosh.
discovered women's studies.
Wait, theater to politics, that
Yes.
works.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It does help with public speaking and presenting my point.
I think we should do a musical for the legislative budget.
If they ever need me to sing, although I'm a little rusty at this point. But it was during college. I was actually in college when 9/11 happened. And that was a pivotal point for me. I really hadn't paid much attention to the world outside myself.
Interesting.
And when 9/11 happened, I began to rapidly, and then was taking women's studies classes, and so just really started to get political in college.
Okay, so do you have a degree in social work too though, right? Or you
Yes.
are a social worker?
So my undergrad is women's studies, and then I went on to get my degree, my master's in social work with a focus in policy. So I, at that point, already knew I wanted to be working on public policy as it relates to social issues.
Okay. Wow. So 9/11, really? You took a turn.
Yeah. It just, so that was the fall of my sophomore year. And all of a sudden, the friends who you're hanging out with have a completely different view than you, and you've never had to think about them or issues in that way. We never really even discussed issues.
Right.
And so on campus at the University of Connecticut, Muslim students started to be under attack, and that was bizarre to me that was a reaction. I went to my first protest, now one of many I've been to, in Hartford, and I'd never been to Hartford at the time, to protest the war. So it really was this moment in time of trying to figure out what my place was and how I could participate more in the world around me.
The times we're in right now are really interesting on so many levels, and I think about my parents who aren't alive now, what they would think about with what's happened in terms of the anger and the judgment of painting one particular group of people around the actions of a few. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the interview, and how we can affect change in terms of how we agree to disagree.
Yeah.
But talk about, you have some big responsibilities that occupy your time, obviously.
Yeah.
How do you first balance everything? What do you do first in the morning? How's your morning start?
I get everybody up. Well, I put on a pot of coffee. That's how the day starts. I put on a pot of coffee, and then, I really encourage my children to do as much as they can independently. But my motto is quality over quantity. So the time we have together, I really make count. And then we each go about our days. So the kids are involved and love school and sports and activities. Husband goes off to work, and then I just really pack up my day.
You do.
But I am a busy type of person, and so these days it's majority being a state rep because we are in session right now.
Right.
And then I'm teaching one class in person and one class online. So that does give some flexibility to do work in the evening.
You're correcting your papers at 9
Yes,
o'clock.
after the kids go to bed, then I'm back at it. And then on the weekend, I find if there's a birthday party, okay, I'm doing 2 hours of work while they're at the birthday party. It's making it work in that way.
Well, I don't know if that makes you an unconventional candidate because there are a lot of women in office right now, working mothers, but people do describe you that way as an unconventional candidate, and how you're moving your body of work even in an unconventional way. So can we start there? What makes you unconventional?
So I didn't wait. I was interested in running for a little bit. There had been a few years where I knew I wanted to run for state representative. I had served on the Board of Ed here in town.
Okay.
And so I started to reach out at that time to the current state representative, and I reached out to other folks in town to let people know I was interested, but was told, well, you don't challenge an incumbent. And so long as the Democrat wants the seat, you got to wait till he's done with it. And I just didn't see that as the way democracy should work or does work. I see it as it's the voters' decision, and we have a process in place for a reason, and so people should utilize that process. And so I did challenge a 23-year incumbent and won in an August primary, went on to win the November election. And I guess it's that same, I feel a sense of urgency. And I don't know if it's because of the times we're living in, or is it because I'm a woman and I see how long change takes. And so I want to move us along as fast as I can while I'm here and have the opportunity. But I bring that sense of urgency into the role at the legislature. And so I introduced a bill to license nail technicians, eyelash technicians, and estheticians. I can finally say that word. It's a new one for me. And we're the only state in the country that doesn't license these professions, and we've been having this conversation for years.
Right.
It's not a new conversation.
No, it's not.
And I've been having it for
Why does it take so long?
Why does it take so long if we
What
know
do-
there's a problem?
So why do you think it takes so long? I mean, do you think it's just because A, there's too much to do, B, there's too much to do and the process we're using for conversation is almost too long? So you hear everybody, but then you have no time to act.
It's either,
I don't know.
It's, well, so yes, or because we don't actually have too long. Now being in there, the session goes rapidly fast while you're in it. And it is a lot to try and get done in that amount of time. But if you've been having the conversations and you really already know, you don't have to start
From the beginning.
from scratch each year. And so that's where I'm like, we already know all of this. And there are 49 other states we can look to.
Right.
To move this ahead. And so I've been having conversations with Department of Public Health, the local departments of public health, the folks, the technicians themselves, the schools who would be teaching the training to try and move this along. And so when I was told I wasn't getting a public hearing for the bill, that was just unacceptable because
What does that mean? Explain for the audience.
Sure.
Does every bill get a hearing, and what makes it public versus private?
Yes, so the only way a bill can get voted on in a committee is if it has a public hearing.
Oh,
and so if you don't get a public hearing, you're not going to get your bill voted on. And the public hearing is the part of the process where you put out all those issues. Let's hear, okay, what do you like, what don't you like? What would make this stronger? What is this state doing? Like, have that conversation publicly so that you can build a better bill. And I just couldn't believe we wouldn't even have the conversation publicly. So I did work with some colleagues and was able to, well, we went into a different committee and asked them to amend a bill, with our language.
Which is such, so basically, in order to get done something that you know would get done, and we've talked about before, you had to basically play a game and add it to something else that was currently going to be brought forward.
Yes. Something that was already getting a
Part
public
of the problem
hearing.
with the process, I guess.
Although we did it, and now we've moved it, and we'll see how far I can get it. I'm not even going to say if not this year. I'm working on this year, and
Do we track legislation that's been discussed, if not moved, more than 3 times? Like, is there a chart that says this topic has been talked about 27,000 times by 40 million reps who've been elected over 30 years, and we still have done nothing about it?
So we do have what's called the Office of Legislative Research, and so I requested of them how many bills have been introduced, and more than a dozen in the last 10 years.
Around that topic?
Around this topic.
That to me is important information because that identifies, if there's a real reason for why dissent, that's for not moving it.
Yeah.
But to have a continual conversation about something that seems obvious.
Yep.
And no one seems to really be against in terms of health code and why you're doing it. To have it linger for 12 years points out part of the process problem, I think, for our own.
The crux of the issue, or why it costs money. The Department of Public Health argues that they would need more staff. Okay, there will be a licensing fee, and the fee will cost money, and so that fee could go back to pay.
So it should be net neutral, if nothing else.
Yes, and so that's where I'm like, can we get to that place where we're having that dialogue about, okay, how much really will it cost? How much is coming in, and how do we make sure that amount coming in goes to pay for it?
And this is so important, but what it calls to, I think, the attention of the audience is how much detail and conversation is required over a simple bill about that.
Yes.
So imagine trying to fix the tax code,
the
healthcare system.
And I would think, that's contributing to it too, when we have so much going on. An issue like this can get lost. Because isn't the bigger focus, and we should be focused on the budget and moving Connecticut's economy forward. And so maybe, I don't know if this is unconventional, but I've also been saying while running and now okay, we can do more than one thing at a time.
Thank you. We do walk and chew gum.
And maybe that's the mom in me, like, we can handle it.
Well, I don't know any mother whose child would come home and say, first I'm going to do this, then I'm going to think about later. No. You're going to get your shoes on, then you're going to go up and clean your room right now.
Yep.
We already from a very young age teach our kids to do more than one thing concurrently.
Yeah.
So, yes, these are big, meaty issues, but none of us in our job can do one thing at a time.
Yes.
So
we need to multitask. Yes.
We need to multitask. You serve on Appropriations, Commerce, and the Education Committee.
Yes.
Let me ask you a few questions there. Did you choose those committees? Do you get appointed to them? How do committees work for membership? And then talk to me briefly about what those committees do.
Sure. So it's an interesting process. As soon as you're elected, on that Tuesday in November, 2 days later, there was a House Democratic caucus. And so I got to meet who were going to be my colleagues come January. And at that point, you fill out paperwork asking for certain committees.
Oh, it's just like Park and Rec. What do you want to do?
Yes. And then the Speaker of the House and the Majority Leader actually choose, because they're taking into account who's going to be the chairs of which committees, mostly folks who have higher ranking. And then figuring out where people are going to go. And so I did request those 3 committees and was given them, which is nice. Appropriations, because the budget is the biggest issue facing our state, and money, when you follow the money, that can usually show you where policy decisions are being made, and so I wanted to be a part of that. Another little interesting thing is when I first started off in doing public policy, I was actually the clerk of the Appropriations Committee back in 06 and 07. So it also was kind of nice to be
back home.
Now on the other side of that committee. The Commerce Committee, I really want to learn more and help with economic development here in this state, and so I saw that as a way to do that. And then education is so important to the community of West Hartford. I come from a family of teachers. I was on the Board of Ed, and so wanted to take
Why
part
do
in
you
that.
think so many politicians, excuse me for calling you that. It's okay.
Maybe we can make it nice.
Make it nice again. Why do you think so many start on the Board of Eds? It's a commonality.
Yeah.
Do you think it's, why?
I think because everything is local. It's, for me, I was just beginning to be involved. My son was starting kindergarten when I got on the board. And so you can make localized decisions that are so important, vitally important to the community.
Absolutely.
I think so. I think that's a way to get in.
And plus, I wonder if it's also because it's a personal issue in so many ways. The people coming to you to either agree or object, they're always doing so with their own child in mind.
Yes.
So maybe it trains you and gets you ready for those emotional requests that you may not agree with, but you still have to respect and hear.
Yes. Yes.
But it seems a common place for people to begin,
Yeah,
Board of
agreed.
Eds. So you explain why you selected those committees, but you do have specific advocacy interests.
Yes.
Women's issues completely. And in fact, you were the director of the Health Professional Outreach for Connecticut Coalition Against Domestic Violence. Talk about what that was.
Yeah, sure. So that was my most recent role. I was working at our statewide domestic violence coalition, and I was going across the state training health professionals to screen for intimate partner violence. So if anyone's been to the healthcare provider lately and hadn't before, but now is being asked about any kind of history of intimate partner violence or domestic violence, it might be the result of the work we were doing across the state. There are studies that show that if you're asked in a healthcare setting and domestic violence is tied to health, it actually increases the likelihood that that individual will seek support. So I was doing that work, but prior to that job and out of college, my passion has always been primarily preventing gender-based violence, sexual assault, domestic violence, human trafficking. And so I've held different roles where I already was up at the state capitol, but on the other side as an advocate, trying to get legislation passed. And so that also was a motivating factor. I'd kind of gotten to a point where, well, why don't I get in there and try and do it from the inside?
Exactly.
Again, that sense of urgency that we would maybe get one thing done a year, but like, how can we move this a little faster?
And you did, right? You did pass, or you drafted the first legislation of its kind, but that's related to?
That was related to campus sexual violence. And so now every school, for example, every college in the state of Connecticut, freshmen have to be trained. There are ongoing programs for students to learn about consent and what the policies are on that campus. That was a result of that policy.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, you got something important and good done. Let's switch topics to gun control. I know this 28 minutes is going to fly by. You have a legislative idea about taxing ammunition that I want you to share with people because.
Yes, so I proposed legislation to tax ammunition at 50%, with the thinking being that there is a significant cost to gun violence in our society, emotionally, physically, financially. And so, before we went on air, I was just talking about Parkland, the shooting in Florida, and we just heard in the news over the weekend that 2 children have committed suicide a year later.
Horrible.
And that's just one example of the trauma that can impact a community. If we look at our urban centers where there's gun violence daily, there's a lot of trauma in those communities as well. And so there are programs in the state and across the country working to prevent urban violence, working to address the trauma folks experience after one of these incidents, but that costs money. There's also the cost, so since Newtown, we've put in a number of requirements at the state level for schools to protect schools and keep them safe, which is a good thing, but that costs money. If you go to any kind of event, a race, if you run, if you go to a running race, you're going to see tons of security these days. And so all of that costs money. And so the thinking is if we tax ammunition, we'd be able to get a revenue stream in to help offset the costs to prevent gun violence, to address it, and then potentially reduce use. Because we have seen with increasing attacks on cigarettes that there is a reduction in use. And I do think, and this is a different worldview from some, I do think we do need to reduce the number of guns in our society.
Yeah, I think, I know this is a very personal and complex topic, certainly. But I would hope that we could all agree that even if we are pro guns, if you will, that there are places and times for certain weapons. It's been so difficult to have these conversations, and I know you have had that experience recently on social media. To talk about what you've seen and heard and felt from that.
So I used a lot of social media during the campaign, and now as a state representative, really to kind of give people a window into what the process looks like and what I'm up to on a daily basis. And so I was doing these little videos where I would tell people about the different bills I'd introduced. And so I did one of these quick videos, it was like a minute long, on the ammunition tax. The NRA caught wind of it and shared it, and it went viral. And so in 24 hours,
little Representative Jillian Gilchrest
from
is
Connecticut,
now
from one town in Connecticut, is now being shared nationally. I was on Reddit, I was on NRA TV, so I would have people like saying, "Oh, you're here now." So I didn't realize how big, I'm going to call it the gun culture is, and so there are many sites and many television shows, and so my team, because I do have a legislative aide, we were getting calls in at the legislature. I was getting calls to my cell phone. So in addition to what people were seeing on social media, there were phone calls, emails coming in, and then just posts all on social media.
And I did look at some of those posts, and they weren't, I disagree, I respect your opinion kind of posts.
So, and that I'm fine with. And I say to folks, agree to disagree.
How do we get back to that?
Yeah.
How do we get back to that?
Because, manners and being courteous, I think is important. And I do want to hear you, because people have raised some interesting points of view, such as, what about at the gun range or hunting? Okay, so let's talk that through and what that looks like. I'm a big believer in the legislative process, and so you introduce a bill, and then you're supposed to have a public hearing or public comment to make it stronger. So I'm all about that. It just, many of the individuals reaching out, majority of whom were out of state from across the country.
So they don't necessarily represent the views of people in Connecticut or the people you represent.
No, and
so you have to be careful when we see these comments on people's Facebook page, on your legislative page. They may not even live in Connecticut, so they have every right to their opinion, but it's important to remember how our state residents feel.
And I don't want to even go there, but I've also been told that person might not even be a person. It's a bot, that there's, so it's hard to tell, but many of these individuals were horribly rude. And saying hate-filled things, and even going so far as to threaten violence. And that is just unacceptable. And I'm not going to engage with you when you're doing that. And again, it is that, okay, even though we disagree, why do you have to take it?
Right.
Where is that anger coming from?
I'm dating myself, but I remember being a child and understanding that politicians didn't agree, but somehow they still went out and had a drink. We've lost the civility in this, and we don't have to, I don't think, be so polarized even though we don't agree. How do we get back to that? It's an example. We're showing our children how to dispute, and so when children don't agree, are we going to accept the fact that they're yelling at each other and walking away? No.
No, we will not.
So now we're showing them, don't do as I do, don't do as I do as I say kind of behavior. How can we get back to listening? And I don't know that you have the answer, but I know personally I would like to see more of that. Even if the ultimate result I don't agree with legislatively, I'd have more respect for the process if we could look at each other again and say, I don't agree with you, but you have the majority, and that's what government's about. I heard you. Maybe I could take a piece of what you said and put it into what I'm saying. Can we ever hope for that?
I think we can, and it really is what you just said. It's leading by example. And I don't do it perfect all the time, but when constituents reach out and I disagree with them, I still respond. And I'm respectful, and or they reach out for a meeting, come on in, let's have that conversation. Can it be uncomfortable at times? Yes. But if we can work through that discomfort and still remain respectful, we do get to a better policy.
Absolutely, and we've made it also personal.
Yes.
I think. I mean, it was always personal, but somehow now politics seems to be on a very personal level, to the point where if we don't agree on a candidate, we almost don't understand why we're friends.
Yeah, it's very much like the Red Sox Yankees,
Right.
and it doesn't need to
Red
be,
Sox.
nor should it. And the Yankees.
Are you?
And see,
We did fine. That's great. Maybe we should do another show at the end of September together and see where we are.
a test case.
A test case. Oh my God. I already asked you about disagreeing and agreeing. What surprised you most about being a state rep? Anything yet?
How much I'm using my social work degree, and what I mean by that is, there's a lot of issues out there, and people are living really great lives and are happy, but they're also struggling. And I'm learning a lot about the different struggles people are experiencing. And being on the Appropriations Committee, we do need to find efficiencies, and I've already located some. I let my constituents know about those as I'm finding them and ways to cut. But there's also a great deal of need.
There is. Working in the senior
Yes.
services, you've come to our Senior Day Center at Hebrew Senior Care, and you see there's a remarkable amount of need in terms of that population, caregiver stress, all of it, the sandwich generation, taking care of their children and their parents. There's a lot that we need to discuss moving forward in terms of health, social welfare, education. I know it is a full-time.
It is, yeah.
It's a full-time job. So let me, one of my last questions for you, and this 28 minutes has gone by so incredibly quickly. So if you had a magic wand and you could make, let's say, 3 legislative wishes, what would you make?
I want paid family and medical leave to pass, because it impacts so many.
It does.
It impacts seniors, it impacts working moms, it impacts working families.
6th oldest state, Connecticut, demographically.
Yes.
So we have a lot of people caring about aging parents.
Yep, so paid family and medical leave. A budget that doesn't rely entirely on taxing, but doesn't cut services that are vitally important. So there's my magic wand.
That is the magic wand wish.
That'll take us up probably till the last day. And then, because I've been working on it so hard, I would love to see us move the needle on licensing nail technicians, eyelash technicians, and estheticians.
I love
in the state.
your list, because it has a range of the big ideas. And can we just get one thing done?
Can we just license them and move this along?
I love it. And I think that's the essence of being a state rep and being involved in the legislature, trying to balance getting big ideas discussed and through and having action. This has been a very quick show. I want to thank you, Representative Jillian Gilchrest, for joining us today.
It was my pleasure.
If you have any questions for Representative Gilchrest and you'd like to send them to me at jointhediscussion@HebrewSeniorCare.org, I will make sure they get passed on. Thanks for joining us tonight, and I hope you enjoyed a variation of the topic for tonight. See you next month.